Ripple me this, riddle me that. Global adoption clues in the water. Let's go on the hunt for that. Hey folks, Sam I Am here. And the last 2 weeks, there have been a lot of people talking about and looking into some of the things that I've suggested around a partnership, not between Swift and Ripple, even though that's the way a lot of them talk about it, but really between Ripple and Temenos and Ripple and SAP. Both of those companies already have interfaces into Swift, and they send MTs back and forth. So by adding RippleNet into their backend software, the banks that use Temenos and the corporates that use Swift will all of a sudden have that capability and come on board to RippleNet en masse. And so I think that's what's underway and what we're about to see in November and December of this year. And we've got some more clues. So this morning, Crypto Erie sent me a heads up on Twitter saying, hey, go watch this video that she put together. And she's been kind of considering my theories, and she's been looking at some of the evidence, and she found some really amazing clues. She did a great job. She asked for my opinion, so I'm going to kind of give you that feedback in this video. But go check out her video. Give her a thumbs up. She did great. And let's jump right in. So she referenced a couple presentations. This is one of them. This is from August 2018. And right here, they're showing kind of the Swift GPI. You've got the banks right here, the corporates down here, their kind of core engine right here. They're showing they have SLAs, which are basically service level agreements, or the rule book, the protocol that you have to follow for Swift GPI. And they're showing that any bank can be the recipient of a GPI transaction. You don't have to be in the GPI network or running GPI or have done the upgrade yourself. And they've also built some value-added products around that. We're going to talk about those. I'm going to explain what those are to you. So the first one is GPI Tracker. So part of GPI, as well as the SR 2018, which is mandatory for all banks, is the bidirectional end-to-end messaging and the UETR. So what they do with that UETR is they send, right now you have messages going back and forth and you don't know which transaction they belong to. There's no real easy way to figure that out and answer that question. So that's where they created this UETR, this unique transaction identifier. And they stream those message types off, and now they have sort of a business intelligence tool. This is exactly what I used to do. Where they can put those MTs together, form a complete TDR, transaction detail record. And if something goes wrong, as this works through the chain of the steps it needs to take in order to move the funds, you can see where the process broke down. And so that's what this is showing you. Here, I think, is where they're going to get their data from the connector layer. This is the customer over here, the other customer that's receiving the funds. These other banks, they'll be able to see those records, but they're not necessarily going to be getting data. But because it's end-to-end, they'll get everything from right here, this number 4 link. Okay, the GPI Observer. So when I used to work in telecom, all the telecoms have something called the NOC, Network Operations Center. If you've ever seen a NASA shuttle launch, they have the control room with the big screens up in the front of the room and rows of computer desks with engineers and people sitting at them. In telecom, you have exactly the same thing. They're watching the weather and a map of the network. And as the alarms come in from failed hardware, failed fans, failed cards, whatever, those get alerted, and those people pick up the phone and call whoever's responsible to go out and fix it. I think that's kind of what they're showing here with this GPI Observer. These are all the banks in the network, and it's giving you some very basic status indications: green, yellow, red. Green, everything's going good. They're processing transactions. Yellow, they're running into some problems. And red, their transactions are failing, so you may need to reroute or something like that. So that's a tool for the banks to use. The directory is kind of like a phone book, but they also have some metrics in here related to the bank's performance. So if you're considering a new correspondent bank or a bank to partner with and interconnect with, this would be a good place for you to go to gather some performance metrics about the bank that you're considering interacting with. Okay. Okay, right here, they're letting us know 67 banks are now live. And of course, this is a couple months old. 119 banks in the implementation phase. But again, if you look at the names here, these are not the small credit unions, the mom and pop banks. These are the big names like, New York Mellon, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, all around the world. These are the big banks. And of course, I think down here, this is the complete list of the 200 that have already signed up for GPI. They just haven't done it yet, or haven't fully implemented yet. Another interesting little tidbit was 5 days after Swift, they used to have on the Swift website, I think it was 30 seconds or something as the typical time to complete. And then 5 days after Swell, they changed that, I think, to 6 seconds or something. Now, what happened in that time? Well, XRapid went live. So if they have customers that are somehow using XRapid behind the scenes, that would explain that change to the Swift website. Okay. So again, not direct proof, but something interesting that kind of points to the same thing happening. Okay, next presentation. This is from May 2017. That's important. So this was last year, a while back, and I apologize for the size. I couldn't figure out how to download these. Two things, and this is another one that Crypto Eerie found, and this one's it is fantastic. One is, here's Swift. They're showing that they have their Swift network. So in telecom, the engineers that actually worked on the switch network, they'd always have two computers on their desk, one that's on the switch network and one that's on the corporate WAN. So the switch network is highly secure. It's never connected to the internet, period, because a virus got in there, that it's switching calls, it's switching emergency traffic that could create very serious problems. So very secure. It ran on its own segmented network within the corporate net, or within the company, essentially. And down here, they're showing this MVSIPN. So that stands for Multi-Vendor Swift IP Network. So they've got Swift, the SwiftNet, they've got the Multi-Vendor SwiftNet IP network. And then this new thing, this Lite 2 that they're talking about with this slide, they're showing auto client and the internet. So what they're doing is creating a VPN tunnel here. And when I used to have to get on the AT&T network, I would call up somebody in the NOC. I would already have my account set up with my username and password. They would have a key fob that would have rotating numbers displaying. I'd tell them I need a passcode for Agilent or Hewlett Packard. They would pull that one up and read me the number. I'd punch it in, and that would get me on the network to download data for a study or whatever we were doing. I think that's what they're showing here with these two USB key fobs here and here, is that's probably a hardware key that they plug into the server that lets them create a VPN tunnel over the public internet in order to interface with Swift. Right here, you can't see it very well, but that's the API. So this is where Ripple, Temenos, all of these other basically companies and vendors out there are going to interface with SwiftNet in order to send MTs back and forth and process transactions. Okay, now the real key that she found here is Lite 2 customers using tokens today on the internet. Now, in the context of these slides and Swift, that can only mean one thing, and it's cryptocurrency. And who do we know was doing trials with the major banks at this time? Ding, 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 if you said Ripple. They had the trials going on, I think with 6 banks or something. They've acknowledged this. The banks have acknowledged this. And it was the one where the banks were actually holding XRP. They decided they didn't like that because of the volatility risk of the value of the underlying asset changing over time. And that's why they're going forward with the market maker, the exchanges being the liquidity providers model. But here, 2017, around the same time these trials are going on, we have a Swift slide telling us that their bank customers are using tokens and it's interfacing with Swift. So This is proof, folks. I know a lot of people don't like that word and want to wait for a reporter from CoinDesk or something to tell them, what to believe. But clear as day, the banks were using XRP or some other token. I don't know what else that would be. At the same time, they were doing trials with Ripple, holding XRP and Swift. These slides are, again, put out by Swift. And they're saying our customers are using Swift and interfacing with us using these internet tokens. Now, we don't have message flows. We don't have any details on what the network elements are or anything like that. So it's a little hazy, I'll give you that, but it doesn't get any clearer than that there's some interoperability going on between Ripple and Swift, for sure. Okay. Another clue here. So this is, Marlene. She is the global head of banking for Ripple. So she's the woman who's in charge of getting all the banks, the central banks on board to RippleNet using Ripple and XRP. And this is a guy who's interviewing her. He does an excellent job, asks some really great questions. I want you to pay close attention to her facial expressions and her body language, what she does with her thumbs. A lot of times she's like this, but there's times where she starts kind of twiddling her thumbs and doing some other body gestures that we're going to get into that, in my view, are very revealing. So let's go.
Yeah, what was your motivation to join Ripple?
Disruption.
Disruption, okay.
We've heard that from the IMF head.
I was very much interested in the vision of Ripple, which is around the Internet of Value. And I think that's really addressing the current pain points that the cross-border space is living. So yeah. I adhered actually to this vision.
Yeah, cool. And before you were working at Swift, which is kind of competitor to Ripple, so it's a distinctive decision to switch from Swift to Ripple. And now I have the impression both Swift and Ripple are not quite sure whether to be competitors and to wall off, or rather collaborate and build something together. You know both very well, so what's your opinion on that?
I personally think that the Ripple and Swift are doing different things. It's true that at the end we are talking about transferring value, but Swift is a messaging mechanism. Of course, it's widely present with the large users, but it remains only to the exchange of data. But when you get to the blockchain...
Okay, I want to stop right there. Now, she's right and she's wrong. Swift is absolutely just a messaging service. They got into, they go a little further than that and do some movement of funds and so forth with Nostro and Vostro, or acknowledgement and so on. But Ripple came along and created Xcurrent, which is the software update that Swift should have done anytime over the last 2 to 5 years. They had the capability, but they're this isolated monopoly. They're bank owned. They don't have market signals like competitive pressure or need to innovate. So they've just rested on their laurels. And then in the last year or so, they've gotten off their ass and put together GPI and some of these other things to basically not get their ass kicked by Ripple and Xcurrent. So now there is a little bit of overlap there, but I think she's making perfectly valid points. So let's continue.
And what Ripple is doing, you are going beyond that exchange of data. You are actually settling value. You are providing the finality and certainty of the payment. So I think it could be very much complementary. Now, probably it takes time before the business lines can meet each other.
Now, I just want to point out she's making a distinction between payment and settlement. So Ripple's doing settlement, Swift is doing payments, and then the settlement happens after the fact.
But I think we are doing different things in this space.
But isn't the Ripple approach a superset then of what Swift is doing, and would rather render
She doesn't
Swift
like that
obsolete
question.
if you reach your goal?
No, I won't say that. I don't think that. I don't think the idea is really to compete or at this level. What we see is blockchain is there to address a need. And the way that we are using this technology is also address a series of inefficiencies. And what we see, for instance, in the current use cases that you hear in the market, such as the global remittance, or even the corporate-to-corporate flows, so the banks are thinking how they can address requirements and change the experience of their customers. If the technology like blockchain and Ripple is more appropriate to bring that to the customers, that's the choice of the customers at the end. That's the way that we see it.
Sure, so absolutely for a bank it makes sense to be already connected to Swift and not turn it off and switch to Ripple, but rather have both, of course. But
he hit the nail on the head right there. The fact is they're going to have both. Swift has the network of the 11,000 banks already trained up and interoperating with each other. Ripple has the superior technology for settlement. So in some cases, it's going to make sense to use the old Swift network, and especially the new and improved Swift network with UETR and these new features that they've basically implemented because Ripple's come along to threaten their position in the marketplace. And then, as she points out, in some cases, they're going to decide to use Ripple because it's cheaper and faster and more efficient. Okay, but in the meantime, there's certainly going to be a need to have both working together.
Maybe only for a certain period, and in the end it turns out, well, why would I need Swift at all if Ripple has enough reach to serve any payment corridor? I would.
Of course.
Yeah.
That remains, as I mentioned, the choice of the market.
Yeah. Okay.
So she's acknowledging that yes, eventually RippleNet will replace Swift and SwiftNet, but in the meantime, there's a need for both. Okay, and that's why they're going to sort of interoperate. That's probably the best word I've come up with for it yet. Okay, now I want to take you to somebody who doesn't like me very much, a guy named Galgatron. Now, he writes a blog. We've gone back and forth a couple months ago about XRP replacing the SDR, something I think as clear as day is going to happen. He was being really kind of ugly, so I asked for his address to send him a humble pie for Christmas, and he blocked me. But this was something he posted just recently. He said, the weekly Swift Ripple partnership theories came up again. It's simple math. Banks can't save money if they have to continue feeding all of Swift's employees. Ripple is automation of the Swift, effectively destroying it. Without destroying Swift, no money is saved. Okay. He's a smart guy. He brings up some great points, but a lot of times, and this is another one of those times, he misses the forest for the trees. Okay. The real cost center in cross-border payments is not Swift. Okay. They're just doing the messaging back and forth. The real cost is in the 3 to 4 days it takes to settle, tying up that capital, and the movement in the FX markets that can basically end up causing you to have to send another payment to make up for the shortfall because the currency depreciated or whatever, and the payment was insufficient to trigger the purchase or whatever it is you were doing. The other reason they're so expensive is because you're basically, before GPI and the UETR and all this new functionality, you're like shooting your money off into the abyss. You send it to your partner, your correspondent bank. They might send it on to 2 or 3 others. Every one of those adds costs, adds human input, and there's a chance for things to go wrong, for it to get lost, for fees to just climb and climb and climb until it finally gets to its destination. That's why it's so expensive, not because of Swift. Okay, so again, smart guy, but man, does he get some things wrong in not recognizing the big picture. Okay, let's go back to Margine. And I want you to watch her body language very closely here. Very revealing.
Okay. And
this is a great
Ripple has
question.
gained a lot of traction, has grown its network a lot. Recently, 100 financial institutions were announced on the RippleNet. However, we don't see large German banks so far. And do you think?
Now look at that smile on her face. She knows exactly where this is going. She can't answer this question, and she knows it. And the reason is, I think the answer to this question is, all the banks are going to come on board with the Temenos integration and turn up of RippleNet. So the big banks don't write their own software. They hire Temenos to come in and provide this standard back-end package that interoperates with all the other banks. They are basically the global standard for back-end banking software. And when RippleNet's available through their software, that's when they're all going to come on board en masse as fast as Ripple can turn them up. Okay. She knows that. She's going to have to stumble for an answer and figure out, okay, how do I answer this without lying, but, giving him a decent answer, but not letting the cat out of the bag and violating any NDAs that I might have signed. Watch her hands, watch her smile, listen to what she says. She ends up stumbling and then just repeats back what he said.
There are specific barriers in Germany for not joining or hesitating?
And that right there was a little, yes, we got this, without the hand part. Okay.
Well, you're right. We have more than 100 customers, which is a combination of both banks and payment service providers, and also now corporates. I think to your point, Germany is a complex market. You have these three pillars of banking industry, and a wide number of banks present. Yeah. This regional as well aspect. It's a quite, I should say, complex financial industry version. And we do have, of course, Raiffeisen Bank, which is the 100% subsidiary of the DZ Bank. Yeah.
That's pretty much the German central bank, the Federal Reserve U.S. equivalent.
That is collaborating with us, and they had a very new experience with the corridor of Canada and Germany. And we are in discussion with many of your banks, actually. And I think, it's again a question of changing and probably other priorities that we feel that today regulation is very much present in the banking space. But we are very confident that Germany will move as well ahead with Ripple.
Okay, so for a German bank, what would you recommend to start with?
Okay. And then they go off into, find the pain points and address those first. But again, she had a big secret that she was dying to tell, but obviously couldn't for reasons of non-disclosure, is my guess. Okay, a couple more things. I'm not sure where this came from, but this was posted when Crypto Erie gave me the heads up. Somebody posted this, and it's very interesting. It's down here in the highlighted section. It says, in parallel, Swift GPI is exploring the potential of using technologies such as open APIs and distributed ledger technology to build additional value into the cross-border payment process. Now, I've said that Swift and Ripple are not working together, but this is the first indication I've seen that that's exactly what they're considering, or maybe, I don't know how old this is, but have actually started to do. And the reason they're doing this is the Temenos stuff only applies to the Temenos customers. The SAP integration only applies to the SAP customers. And the GPI stuff that's enabled, that's only going to be the customers that upgrade to GPI. That's right now 200 out of 11,000 banks. A direct RippleNet, SwiftNet integration would basically open up Ripple and XRP usage to all of the 11,000 banks, not just the 200 or plus that have currently adopted or implementing GPI. So that's a big development. That's the first time I've seen anything around there. That's something I'm going to be, if you guys want to hunt for more clues and things, send my way, please do. But that's pretty big. Okay. One more thing here. We've got 3 exchanges, Binance, Bittrex, and Bitstamp, that all are now sitting on $1 billion or more XRP. And I think there's a 4th. And this is also not showing Backed, which I have no doubt will be the preferred liquidity provider for the US dollar, for the US market. So if we have all of these banks coming on en masse through the Temenos integration, and all of these corporates coming on, starting to use Ripple and XRP en masse, you're going to need massive liquidity pools in order to pull this off and make this happen. And now that's exactly what we're seeing. Okay. So folks, the clues are everywhere. The signs are clear as day to me. I know a lot of the respectables, and you definitely have to use air quotes with respectables, who just want to look at the news and wait for some reporter to put a story together and connect the dots for them before they are willing to believe it. That's fine. Do that. But it's clear as day that this is what they're doing and this is what's happening. And I think we're going to see a very, very busy and eventful November and December for Ripple and XRP. Okay, folks, I've got another video coming shortly after this. I hope you enjoyed this one. I will catch you soon.